The African Development Bank is hosting the 57th annual meetings of the African Development Bank and the 48th annual meeting of the African Development Fund. The event is being held in a hybrid style at the Accra International Conference Center in Ghana, with governors, executive directors, and top bank management officials in attendance. It started on May 23 and will end on May 27, 2022. Now, the annual meetings are the most important yearly statutory event at which the banks and African Development Fund's boards of governors examine the government's and the group's actions. The meeting will also be a chance to assess regional reactions to the epidemic, vaccine strategies, and the growing threat posed by climate change. At this year's event, energy transition and its financing in Africa takes center stage. The Africa Development Bank is leading the conversation regarding a just energy transition for Africa, and it has affirmed its commitment to investing $25 billion in energy adaptation in Africa. So today, we are discussing AfDB's focus on Africa's energy transition and climate financing. And this is Business Edge. I am Lekon Obanjo and I'm standing in for Tolu Lokpe at the Leruba Logo. You're welcome. And joining me from Accra, Ghana is Japhet Omojuwa, a board member, HFX Forum, and also an author. Good morning to you, Japhet. Thanks so much for joining us on Business Edge.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm fine. So there have been lots of talks about AfDB leading the conversation as regards energy transition for Africa. So tell us, this particular conversation, what does it mean for Africa? And what are the current shaping ups in terms of the trajectory of this particular discussion?
It means everything for Africa. And I should say that the AfDB is not just leading the conversation, it is also leading the action on climate adaptability on the continent. It is intervening directly on the challenges. It is helping to influence policies across the country. It is representing Africa on the highest global platforms with respect to climate change and climate adaptability across the continent. And I would think that it's one of the reasons why some elements abroad are very, very committed to unsettling the organization. Africa as a continent is the lowest contributor to climate change effects in the world, less than 4%. But unfortunately, there's a disproportionate impact on the continent in terms of the negative effects of climate change versus our contribution. And when we speak about a just energy transition, for me, just in that statement is justice. If we were speaking about a just energy transition, we must speak, if you're asking the continent to reverse coal, as we're doing, say, for South Africa, we have to also back our words with action, right? There's been a lot of talk with respect to the pledges that have been made in Copenhagen in 2009 and subsequent pledges in several climate meetings. But, talk must become action. Seeing is never going to be enough. Hearing is never going to be enough. We have to start seeing the money. So it was really important to bring all these issues to the fore. The African Development Bank president, Nigeria's Akin Adewumi, was at the forefront of this, and also the bank governors and other stakeholders.
Fine. You are in Accra, Ghana. You're part of the discussion. And there is this idea that Africa must use its resources to develop its regions. Of course, that discussion has been going on for years. And, looking at that, we understand that there have been some sort of divestments, majorly by oil marketing countries, notably Nigeria. So tell us, do you think that Africa actually has what it takes to secure the needed investments to drive this conversation? Because the world is already moving towards transitioning into renewable energy. So do you think that Africa has got that capacity to push this agenda?
I'll start by saying on this one that it's not as much about Africa and its capacity as it is about the entire world. A just energy transition is not limited to Africa. It's about the rest of the world. It's about the entire world. It's about sustainable energy. It's about low carbon. It's about equitable energy systems for all people, for the entire planet. So we must be careful not to think of this in terms of the conventional capitalistic thinking that, if the resources or the situation is not conducive for capital, then capital cannot go there. It is in the interest of the world that capital flows towards Africa in terms of its adaptability. And I do believe that said, Africa has the resources to meet these challenges. And when I say resources, I don't just mean resources under the ground, I mean people. A lot of Africa's response and adaptability response to these issues are actually by Africans, not just at the African Development Bank, but even the African Union and other such organizations, and also Africans on the board and platforms that are also, like COP20, the COP meetings, the IMF, the World Bank has to meet, and the world has to commit to helping Africa meet that challenge, primarily because if we're speaking about justice, then we must accept that Africa has not, if you look at the numbers, Africa has not contributed significantly to these challenges. So if we're reversing the challenges, we must help Africa. And when I say help, I don't mean help in terms of Africa bringing its begging book. We must help Africa because in helping Africa, we're helping the rest of the world.
Now, talking about helping Africa, Omojuwa, there's been said that there are rare earth elements and some other parts of components of batteries and some sort of raw materials that are found in Africa. Africa has got that sort of abundance, but then we really add value to these things when it comes to exporting these minerals. So tell us, what's been said in enhancing the value chain across board?
Interestingly, I think that's one of the highlights of the things I hear from the AfDB group president, not just at these meetings, but also a lot of the speeches of his head in the past, his commitment to adding more value to African products, whether it's farm produce or even talent, not just sending our young people across, the Atlantic or over to Europe. And it was also interesting that Ghana's President Addo emphasized this. But what I would like to say is, a roaring lion does not kill any game. So words are not going to be enough. Action would matter. I think that the AfDB is doing a lot on this front. Individual countries must also commit to that, and they must commit beyond just talking and pledging. They must commit in terms of changing the policies around production, around exports, so that we're not just exporting our products in their raw form, we're adding as much value to them, because for each level of value that you add to your exports, you're actually adding more jobs, you're increasing your productivity, you're increasing the strength of your currency, you're keeping your jobs at home, you're reducing the flow of capital with respect to the balance of trade and other such things. So it has a multi-dimensional effect, and it's something that individual African countries have to pay attention to, even though the African Development Bank appears to be leading on this front too.
All right, let's talk about the GDP. Now, it's been said that the GDP growth and access to energy are closely related. Looking at the Africa Economic Outlook 2020 has been reported. Now, when we have the World Bank, who is actually moving towards renewable energy and transitions, the bank, that is the AfDB, says that gas will be part of its main energy mix. So tell us, how do you think that this equity in the issue of historic emissions, looking at current and future emissions and the need to grow economies, can bring about a sustainable change and growth in this discourse?
First of all, is to understand that when the rain falls, it doesn't fall on one roof. So the consequences of climate change will not affect individual countries. They will affect all of us as a collective. The way the pandemic affected all of us as a collective, the way Russia's war in Ukraine, even though it's a war supposedly between two countries, affecting virtually the rest of the world. So that's the way we have to think about it. That's the way we have to drive our action about it. That's the way we have to start to look at the issues, and to also make Africa strong in its response to these issues, to also understand that we cannot depend on ideas from abroad. I've been in Ghana for about 4 or 5 days, and I've been speaking to taxi men. There was a particular taxi driver that was just complaining about the government. He was even asking me if I could pay him the car to do his taxi business. There was a hotel attendant that was also complaining about jobs and other sort of things. But no matter how much I speak to people, I would never understand the issues in Ghana as much as somebody that has been in Ghana, whether since birth or has been in Ghana for several years, studying the challenges and the problems and the opportunities in Ghana. So Africa must trust its own voice. Africa must trust its own people in addressing these challenges. That said, it doesn't mean that we should not, pay attention to ideas from abroad, especially those that are actually genuinely interested in our response to these issues, that are actually genuinely interested in the collective prosperity of our people. Because at times, what I see is, consultants just looking to get some money from the pledges and the funds that come to the continent, and vestiges of colonialism by some governments that don't seem to realize that we're no longer in the 1861s and the 1950s. This is 2022, and this continent, Africa, must be trusted and be allowed to grow, and its people allowed to lead that growth.
Well, Omojuwa, there are other growing concerns about those who might lose their jobs by the time this transitioning begins to take effect. But then let's quickly go on a break. We'll take your reaction on that and see how that would affect workers in Africa, because, of course, they are at the brunt of it all by the time this metamorphosis begins to take place. So just stay with us for a while, and I will be with you. Now, top shorts within the AfDB rank, including major players in Africa's economy, are currently having discussions around the next move for Africa's energy transitioning to renewables, financing, challenges posed by the climate change, and other realities affecting Africa's economy and health. Now, the bank has also renewed its commitment to invest $25 billion towards stable energy systems adaptation in Africa. So can these deliberations and commitments yield measures that support global efforts at ameliorating the debilitating effects of climate change while jobs are being sustained and, of course, improving Africa's economy? So we get to seek answers to this discussion, but then let's quickly go on a break. And when we return, the conversation will continue. Do stay with us. AfDB's focus on Africa's energy transition and climate financing is what we've been considering on Business Edge today. And our guest still remains Japhet J. Omojuwa, a board member, HFX Forum, and also an author. So I just go back to him right now, Japhet, to ask you, when you look at South Africa's economy, we discovered that it is dependent on coal jobs, mining of coal and all that. And we hear that about 120,000 people depend on this for survival. But then South Africa came out in November 2021, that was last year, to say that it has been able to secure about $8.5 billion in financing for the next 5 years from the world powers and the European Union to help the country install more clean energy, accelerate the country's transition away from coal power, and cushion the blow that it might have on workers who may be affected. So I'm asking, do you think this can work without having an adverse effect on the workers?
100%. And, if you want to know where the jobs of the future will be created, just pay attention to the flow of capital. And the South African issue that you mentioned, let me say that the AfDB was influential in helping to raise that money, and they are currently working with other institutions abroad to increase that funding to $27 billion. It just means that those opportunities will come. And if you look at the other interventions by the bank in other parts of the continent, whether it's in Ghana, infrastructure, the Ghana airport, the Pokwase interchange, the second of its kind on the continent, the first of its kind in the region, interventions in Ethiopia affecting farmers in their millions, increasing productivity and the volume of production with wheat, soybeans, and other such stuff. I know there's new forms of intervention even in Nigeria. About 7 Nigerian states are going to be affected. The AfDB helped to insure Madagascar against the effects of climate change. And that insurance, that $4 million insurance, helped them to recover $12 million that went on to affect, compensation for 0.6 million farmers in Madagascar. So when we speak about these issues, we're not speaking about fun or cool thing. We're speaking about real stuff that has capacity to create jobs and opportunities, not just on the continent, but across the world. And, like I said, just look at the flow of capital, look at the flow of commitments of funding. You would see that they are going in this direction. And that's just what it is. We need to be more open-minded. Things will continue to improve. Some of the products with respect to the energy transition are at their second or third stage. They will just only get better. And whether we like it or not, the world must reverse its energy sources. We must do better. because if we burn the planet down, there would be no energy anyway, because by then we would all be gone. So we must be responsible in terms of the choices that we make. And the thing about these choices is that we're not going to lose at the end. We're actually going to gain. Those that were working coal, the 120,000 people that were working in coal, we work in industries that are non-coal but new, and they will be held here. I'm an investor, for instance, in such industry in South Africa that is helping to save battery and help people conserve energy. So these opportunities are limitless. And it's not just about the banks and the big institutions. There are also big opportunities for individuals on the continent and outside the continent. And we just need to open our eyes, see the flow of capital and the flow of opportunities, and commit to a better future.
Now, there's also this criticism that I'd like to sift your opinion on. It's about climate financing mirroring global finance architecture. Now, it's been said that these structures are loose and complicated, as it were. So I'd like to know, do you think Africa, which actually has most of these resources, has got the opportunity to benefit more from this conversation and these schemes that are being brought up? And would you be surprised if things go south and they're not able to achieve their aim at the end of the discourse and implementation?
Unfortunately, we hear more about pledges than we see money. Unfortunately, even when you see the money, the process of assessing the money, the process of measuring the money, it's quite difficult and cumbersome. And that's why Africa must think of itself in terms of these solutions. We must think of ourselves. We must think of the institutions on the continent that can help us stand better, that can help us thrive. And I think those organizations like the African Development Bank must continue to be strengthened. We cannot afford to lose the power and essence of organizations like the AfDB. The reason is that for you to even know how important they are, just remove the infrastructure that they've committed to. Forget about the last 50 years. Just remove the infrastructure that they've been involved in over the last 5 years. Remove their influence in terms of our climate adaptability on the continent. That's by far the most committed organization in terms of climate adaptability. You mentioned the $25 billion that the bank will be committing to climate adaptability by 2025. And one would expect that that number probably would double again by 2030. So let's, as much as we will continue to look at what's coming from abroad, it's also very important that we look at what we're doing ourselves. Before you call people to come and help you lift your load, you must be seen to be attempting to lead that load by yourself. That's what will encourage other people to do that. So ultimately, we must learn to help ourselves. We must learn to stand for ourselves. We must learn to stand for our rights. And we must also learn to speak loudly about our challenges. And we must be brave and proud about the place of Africa in the rest of the world. And we must find a way to reverse the vestiges of colonialism, e.g., like the president was saying at the launch of the African Economic Outlook 2022. Our people were moved to slave plantations against their will several hundred years ago, right? Now our people are moving themselves because opportunities abound abroad. So the structure, the economic structure of colonialism and slave trade, they remain, even though the motivations are a bit different. We must reverse that. We must reverse that because we cannot develop and grow Africa without African talents, without the African people. So we must make our continent, we must make our economies competitive, and we must see the world as it is now, which is that everybody is looking for their own interest, and as a collective, as a people, as individual countries on the continent, also using the African Free Trade Agreement, commit to an Africa that grows, an Africa that thrives, an Africa that also looks at itself more than it looks at what the world is bringing to it.
So finally, Japhet, what other areas do you think AfDB should be looking at in terms of its focus on getting the best out of the Africa's energy transition and, of course, the climate financing schemes? Probably the other areas that they're not looking at, because we are looking at how to ensure that this comes to light and, of course, the benefits, of course, definitely will spill over to Africa, even as we consider other regions.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that I would see more than the AfDB. They have more people, they have more eyes, they have better brains and more brains than I do. But what I would just like to say is that they need to do this with Africans, young people in mind. I heard the president and other members of the AfDB hierarchy talk about women. I think, that talk must really become reality they need to commit more to inclusion. And inclusion, not just for the sake of we have inclusion because that's what helps the world get better. If you bring people of different ideas, different minds, different gender to the table, you get better ideas. So that's what we must commit to. Get more young people on the table, and not just get them on the table, get them to speak, hear their voices, and also there should be a very good mix. When you look at these issues across the continent, whether it's in investment or conversations, countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, they tend to feature a lot. We must intentionally seek out other African countries that are hardly represented on these platforms, because unfortunately, some of them are actually higher hit by these issues and these woes than the ones that we like to mention. So, when we talk about inclusion, it's not even just about youth and women, it's also about countries. Too many times there are countries you barely even hear their names when these things are spoken about. And those countries also must, they must speak louder. And sometimes if you don't speak, you don't eat. So they must speak, they must look to be heard, they must raise their hands, they must raise their voices. And at the end of the day, I trust in our ability as a people, and based on the things I've heard this week, based on the people I have seen leading that change, and based on the fact that we as a continent and as a people, whether we like it or not, whether we like to admit it or not, are not where we used to be. We've moved much farther than we have. Our poverty rates have actually reduced across the continent. Jobs have, and this is minus the outlier effects of the pandemic and Russia's war in Ukraine. Okay. I'm just talking about the trends over the last 20 years. So we must just look to scale better ideas more. And continue to commit to a better continent that works for all of us.
Definitely, we get to do that. Thank you so much, Japheth Omojuwa, for joining us on the show.
Pleasure.
Definitely, the conversation will continue, and we want to believe that you will oblige yourself when we call upon you some other time.
The pleasure will be mine.
All right, thank you so much. Well, in the coming days, a robust report will be presented after deliberations and at the 57th annual meetings of the African Development Bank and, of course, the 48th annual meeting of the African Development Fund. It is worthy to know that whatever decisions that would be made would shape Africa's energy trajectory and, of course, our probable results. And it is only important that they get it right at the implementation stage, just as Omojuwa has said. So let's quickly run off on this break. When we return, we get to bring you NC4 to watch. Don't go away. And Renewable Energy Authority revealed that 5,200 square kilometers have been allocated to establish renewable energy projects, either by public or private sector companies. The lands allocated to the project are sufficient to produce 60,000 megawatts. Now to Tunisia. The Tunisian government hopes to start official negotiations in the coming weeks with the International Monetary Fund for a $4 billion loan, its finance minister said, as the country suffers from its worst financial crisis. Tunisia is seeking the loan to avoid public financial bankruptcy, but it would mean committing to unpopular reforms, including freezing wages and cutting energy and food subsidies. In other news, the possibility of a spillover from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, according to South Africa's central bank, might harm the country's financial stability by raising food and fuel inflation, slowing economic development, and, of course, increasing unemployment, reports have revealed. And finally, the sale of Chelsea Football Club to U.S. investor Todd Boehly has been approved by the United Kingdom government, bringing a close to Russian billionaire, that is Roman Abramovich's near 20-year ownership of the football club. The approval of the 4.25 billion pounds, that's about $5.3 billion sale, first reported by Bloomberg News, ends months of uncertainty for fans and staff of the London club, which Abramovich was forced to put up for sale in early March, shortly before being sanctioned as part of UK's response to Russia's war in Ukraine. And that's the size of our package on Business Edge for today. Do not forget that you can visit our social media platforms at News Central TV. You can also download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store and visit our website www.newscentral.africa. We'll see you some other time. I am Lekon Obanjo. Have a fantastic day.